In this video, I'm going to go deeper than anyone has ever gone before into the benefits and drawbacks of reading physical books, Kindle books, iPhone/iPad books, and Audible books. We're going to be looking at all of these mediums in terms of cost, readability, ease of note-taking, aesthetic/fun factor, and finally, durability. Each section is going to be rated out of 5 koalas because that just kind of sounded funny. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to try and be as objective as possible, but it's going to be impossible not to have my opinion come up somehow. The first thing we're going to start with is physical books. Now, physical books are quite decently cheap compared to the other mediums. You don't have to buy a Kindle, Audible subscription, or buy a phone. They do cost more on a book-to-book basis, especially if you're getting hardcover compared to Kindle. 3 out of 5 koalas in cost. For readability, physical books are subpar. You can't read physical books at night unless you get a night lamp, which is hard for me because of my love for sleeping. You also have to turn the pages physically because it's a physical book, and it's hard to read because of the curve from the book. Also, if you're one of those people that turns pages using their thumb and tongue, and then don't tell anyone when you give away that very copy of the book, what is wrong with you? It definitely has not happened to me before. They're super obnoxious to carry around as well. You have to take an entire continent with you in your backpack. And if you want options, it makes it super hard for you to move if you move houses. 2 out of 5 koalas. Note-taking is not great either. You have to have a pen or highlighter with you at all times, and you need to open each specific book individually to even see your notes. You're often going to run out of space in the margins to write things in, and if you highlight something only to regret it later, you have to sit there and contemplate your life decisions. Sometimes the notes get lost or you lose the books, and all your hard work is just gone. I love using an app called Readwise to upload my highlights into my second brain, but I have to manually take a picture with my phone to get it in on physical books instead of just being able to highlight on a Kindle. 2 out of 5 koalas. Aesthetic/fun factor is where physical books are the true creme de la crop. There's something to be said about the feeling of a physical book in the hands. The flipping of the pages, the smell of the book. As you read more and more books, you get to see your bookshelf grow and literally feels like your brain is expanding alongside it. While reading the book, you have a sense of progression as you flip the pages and end your reading sessions with a bookmark. Most books have really cool art on the cover as well. 5 out of 5 koalas. Finally, we have durability. Unfortunately, physical books just are not very durable. Of course, it depends on if you get a paperback or hardcover, but for the most part, over time, your books will likely start to get destroyed. If you carry them around in your backpack, they're probably going to get smushed, and just the wear and tear of turning the pages and leaving them open-faced on tables is really going to add up. 2.5 out of 5 koalas. Overall, physical books are always going to be the original and coolest way to read, but I find myself reading them more for leisure when I pick them up. I'm going to delve into the reasons why when we talk about the Kindle. So, Kindle books. So for Kindle books, you unfortunately do have to buy a Kindle Paperwhite or Oasis for cost. However, that is, in my opinion, one of the best single financial decisions that you will ever make. It's only around $130 for the Kindle Paperwhite, and it's going to serve you for the rest of your life. The best part about a Kindle is there's no other thing that you can use it for other than reading. This means you're never going to have the unrelenting temptation to scroll through social media for 2 hours while reading. The digital books themselves are usually cheaper than their physical counterparts as well. So if you're reading for any length of time over a year, which I strongly recommend you do, the Kindle is going to be proportionally less expensive than physical books. 4 out of 5 koalas. Readability on the Kindle is also really, really good. With a Kindle, you have access to thousands of books with the click of your finger. That means no more bike rides or move-in days with a mountain of books in your bag. All you have to do is bring your Kindle with you and you have access to thousands of books. You can even share your Kindle books with others in your family for free or for 14 days if it's a friend, which saves you the unfortunate scenario of getting back your borrowed physical books and having to wonder if your friend drove over it with their car. The Kindle can also be really easily read in the dark. Unlike a physical book, and it subtracts more sleep damaging blue light than the Kindle app on the iPad or phone. It's also super easy to flip pages because you can slide your thumb to the left or right rather than using your hand, and it's flat, meaning you don't have to deal with the crinkling of pages as you read. I also love Kindle books because it's easier to put them down if you aren't enjoying them. One of my best tips for starting a reading habit is to realize that you don't have to read the entire book. With a Kindle book, you can just set it down. 5 out of 5 on the Koala scale. Next up is note-taking. Highlighting is super convenient on the Kindle because they all get stored in a central database for super easy access later on. While reading, you can click on your notebook and see every single one of the highlights taken in the book up to that point. You can also use different colors in the app, which allows you to highlight differently depending on the context. I like to use yellow for anything interesting, pink for studies, blue for anecdotes, and orange. Never mind, I don't use orange for anything. Showing other friends highlights is super easy as well because you can just share them through text or email and get them up on the app pretty much faster than any physical book where you're going to have to open it up and find the specific highlight. The only unfortunate thing about the Kindle is it takes so gosh darn long to type notes into the highlights you make, which is super obnoxious. If you take as many notes as I do, it can be a real pain. Most of the time, I read Kindle at night and I'm not in the highest of mental states. So when I can do a highlight, it's mainly incomprehensible when it shows up in my note-taking app. Finally, Kindle highlights can sync with Readwise. Check out my video in the description, which lets you take notes on it super easy in your note-taking app of choice. 4 out of 5 koalas. The aesthetic/fun factor is where physical books take back the lead. There's no feeling like holding a paper book in your hands and flipping through it with the glorious scent all the way through. It's not as fun to buy Kindle books either because they only show up as digital pictures in your library rather than a massive awesomeness on your bookshelf. Even when you are reading a book, the feeling of progress isn't nearly as fun because you only get a small progress bar in the bottom. Despite this fact, you can get some sick Kindle covers like this galaxy thing that I managed to find on Amazon. So I'm still going to have to give them 2 out of 5 koalas. Last up is durability. It's kind of hard to hurt a Kindle. I mean, I've dropped this baby more times than I can count, and it still seems to be holding up just fine. Whenever I drop a physical book, it always seems to just get destroyed right away. I'm going to have to give the Kindle 5 out of 5 koalas. Overall, I find myself reading Kindle every night before bed, and I can't recommend it enough for somebody trying to get into the habit of reading. It's easily one of my best tips for starting a reading habit. Even though the Kindle is incredible, I admit that I find myself using the following option much more for reading. That option is iPad/iPhone books. So at the beginning of the video, I did mention I would be a little bit biased. And this is where that's really going to show because I do most of my reading on my phone. I'm going to admit that it definitely is the worst of all 4 mediums on the cost front. You can get a pretty cheap iPhone 6 for under $100, but most people nowadays want to use higher end digital devices. Even if you're more modest to settle for the iPhone 10 or an iPad Air, it's probably still going to cost between $200 and $500. 1 out of 5 on the Koala scale. As for readability, pretty much everything I said for the Kindle holds up for reading on the iPad/iPhone. One thing I have noticed, however, is that the iPad/iPhone doesn't seem to take as much blue light out of the screen at night as the Kindle, and I find it much easier on the eyes to read the Kindle before bed. That said, most people bring their phones with them everywhere, making it even easier to have access to thousands of books with you instead of a Kindle as well. The one major problem that I do see with most beginners is that the phone and iPad bring with it a ton of distraction like Instagram, TikTok. If you are starting the reading habit, I would not recommend reading on the phone/iPad because you need an insane amount of discipline. For me, it's a 5 out of 5 on the Koala scale, but maybe it's only a 3 out of 5 for most other people. Note-taking is where I think the iPad/iPhone definitely shine. Everything I said about the Kindle is the same, except it's so much easier to take notes on the iPad that is not even funny. This single-handedly makes the phone my favorite reading tool because of how fast I can just take notes using the keypad. Easily a 5 out of 5 on the Koala scale. Aesthetic/fun factor is where I think that the iPad/iPhone takes a hit. It's not terrible to read on one of these devices if you can get past it, but you're constantly going to have the struggle of everyone around you thinking you're a time bum. Literally nobody I know reads on the iPad/iPhone. So whenever people see me reading, they assume that I'm playing games for hours on end. I can't tell you the number of times that my dad has walked in on me reading and just looked at me in silent disappointment because he assumes I'm texting. 2 out of 5 koalas. Finally, the points are about the same as the Kindle for durability. I would argue that phone and iPad nowadays might be more durable because of the addition of cases and screen protectors. You can even get waterproof phones and iPads. 5 out of 5 koalas. Overall, I often see myself using my phone the most for reading throughout the day. Ease of note-taking is just too good for me, and I like reading most for learning new things, which is why it's just something I have to not pass up. Finally, we're going to be looking at Audible Books. Audible Books are the things that you can read on Audible and Libby, and are probably another one of my favorite ways to consume books. That being said, it's easily the most expensive of all of the mediums, not only because you need a phone and headphones to listen, but Audible Books themselves are just ridiculously expensive. It's easily $20 to $30 for the average book, which is why I would recommend that you get an Audible subscription, link in the description, which allows you to get one free Audible book every single month using one of your credits. 1 out of 5 koalas. The readability of Audible Books is absolutely insane. You can literally listen to them while doing pretty much anything that doesn't require lots of cognitive effort. I love listening while biking between classes, in the car, doing laundry. It quite literally makes everything more fun. Before I had Audible, I hated doing the laundry. Now that I have Audible though, I can just pop up the Audible app and listen to some Stormlight archives. This makes every chore way more fun. I'm actually excited to do the dishes now just because I know I can read an Audible book. Easy 5 out of 5 koalas. Note-taking is where I struggle with Audible Books. It's really obnoxious to take out your phone and write down what resonated with you while listening to a book. I rarely found myself reading nonfiction books on Audible. For the most part, I stick to fiction works and listen to Audible books strictly for leisure. 1 out of 5 koalas. Aesthetic/fun factor is a weird one for Audible. On the one hand, you don't get that incredible feeling of having the book in your hands like a physical book. However, Audible Books bring an entirely new art to reading because of the addition of voice actors into the scene. Suddenly, you now have your favorite characters being given different voices or tones and pitches depending on the scene. 4 out of 5 koalas. Finally, we have durability, which is pretty much the same as iPad/iPhones, since that's most likely what you're going to be reading Audible books on anyways. 5 out of 5 koalas. Physical books, Kindle reading, iPad/phone reading, and Audible books all have their places when it comes to reading. Personally, I really like to read on my phone, followed by Audible, Kindle, and finally physical books. That said, it might change for you based on your preferences. It all depends on what you'd rather spend your time doing. Check out my video on 5 game-changing lessons from books you need to read above. This is going to give you an idea on which books you can read using one of these forms that I just discussed. As always, have a fantastic day, and bye-bye.